I'm Shawn Hemming. I'm an account executive with Thoughtexchange. And I'll be co-hosting our virtual event today with my colleague Kai, who I'll introduce you to in a minute here. And we're joined by a special guest, Shawn Haggarty, this morning. So we'll just give it a couple minutes here for a couple other people to join us. Over the last 8 years, Thoughtexchange is a company we've had the pleasure of working with a number of different divisions in Alberta. And I pulled some stats, some interesting stats that our team pulled. Over the years, we've ran over 550 exchanges to 887,000 participants, 107,000 thoughts shared, and just about 2.5 million ratings. And so a lot of that may not make sense if you're not familiar with Thoughtexchange, but really looking at the connections between district leadership and the stakeholders that are involved. And so really excited to lead that into our conversation around the new assurance framework today. Because when I read through that document, really what I see is it's involving stakeholders more in the decisions that are happening at the leadership level. And so I'll turn it over to Kai, and I'll let you, because you've been working closely with Shawn, and I'll let you introduce our speaker for today, Shawn Haggarty.
Fabulous. So while Shawn is pulling up the slides here, I'll just put a disclaimer. We've got two Shawns spelled the same way, both Shawn H's. So I'll say full name. So as Shawn Hemming said, we work together at Thoughtexchange. For those of you who just joined and who don't know me, my name is Kai Cafferson. I'm located in a small town in British Columbia, and I'm an account manager with Thoughtexchange. So I've been working with our partners across Canada, specifically in Alberta. And I've had the pleasure of supporting a number of folks who have been piloting the assurance model, which is now transitioned to the framework. So we have the pleasure of digging in more deeply to how Shawn Haggarty has been piloting this assurance framework and some of the learnings that he shared with us moving forward, and then some resources that Thoughtexchange has put together to support you at the various stages in your leadership journeys with this framework. So Shawn, Shawn Hemming, I'll let you share those slides.
And thank you, Kai. Thank you, everybody who's on. Elk Island Catholic Schools, we started this journey in 2013. And at that point, there were 6 divisions throughout Alberta that were given the opportunity to develop a framework. And it's pretty broad, what was shared. So we were allowed the flexibility to design our education plan with locally identified needs as priorities. We were then allowed to design an engagement process and then identify the linkages between the local goals and the province. So for the last 6 years, now going on 7 years, we've been refining this piece. And with it, now that it's moved from a pilot into the framework that we're called, there's a large philosophical shift moving from accountability to assurance. And when reading through the funding framework, it's easy to look at it and say, if I just do an incremental change, that I can now just kind of continue with the process. But as we in our journey started to delve in, there was huge structural changes that we made, but always from the focus from accountability through to assurance. And I just wanted to just spend a minute or two talking about that shift. In the past, as an administrator working through, I'd often hear a staff member say, well, why is it only the paths and the dips that seem to be important? What about this and what about that? Assurance has allowed us to move from a provincial managed system to a local autonomy where it comes to developing the reporting that we do. Accountability is upwards. I, as superintendent, am accountable to the board. I'm accountable to Alberta Education. A teacher is accountable to the principal, who's accountable to senior admin, and so on. Accountability flows upward. One of the biggest shifts is that assurance also flows downwards. I have a responsibility as superintendent or as a principal of a school to have assured the stakeholders, the students, the staff, the parents, are we headed in the right direction? And how do we know that we're headed in the right direction? And so our accountability is solely up in the accountability pillar framework. Now with assurance, it is both we're accountable up, but I also need to provide assurance downward as well as upward. In the framework of the accountability pillar, before it was also very narrow in focus. We had our grades 4s, grade 7s, grade 10s that were surveyed and so on. Over the last 6 years in Elk Island Catholic, we've moved to very broad. So every parent, every student, every staff member completes our assurance survey, which couples up also the province's accountability pillar survey. So instead of being a small group of parents that we're hearing the voice from, we're hearing broad. We've also been able to, by asking our stakeholders what is important, build certain priorities around it, strategies and measures that flow through, right down to the cleanliness of the school, the ride times that were there. Being a Catholic board, some very specific measures around our faith formation and so on. When we now have a teacher at the high school say, yeah, well, what about this priority? Isn't it important too? Now the response is, great, how are we going to measure it? How can we report on it? Can we build that in? We are all aware of the Christmas tree priority reports that comes from Alberta Education. We've shifted to a public dashboard, so available all year long is all of the measures, all of the data is available to all of our stakeholders on our website. We keep this updated on a regular basis, but again, shifting from a one-time reporting period to working with data all the way through the year. One of the biggest shifts, and I'll talk about this a little bit more later, is alignment around priority-based budgeting and timing, around staffing a building and setting budgets. But our work now is done in the spring in regards to our assurance surveys, AER, and so on, instead of in the fall. But like I said, I'll touch more on that a little bit. We found this model to be far more responsive in meeting the needs. And there again, we now, instead of a perceived disconnect from the classroom to school jurisdiction to Alberta Education and so on, there is a complete coherence. And so we have Alberta Education's areas that we are to measure, that ties into our division assurance plan, that ties into a school assurance plan, and every teacher in our division doing a staff assurance development plan. But assurance is about engagement, and that's where the tool that we've found and we're highly supportive of is Thoughtexchange. Because when we just get a survey or a number, it's very difficult to unpack it and understand it. And being a Catholic board, I'll give you a specific example. We'll often see that we might be scoring 96% where it comes to parents satisfied with Catholicity. Okay, are they satisfied because we're not that Catholic? Are they satisfied at 96% that we should be more overt or more working with our faith? It doesn't give us the layers to delve down into really what the thought is with it. And because of the transparency piece with assurance, we're forever going back to our stakeholders and say, are we getting it? Are we hitting the mark? I can't see that level of, I can see what the number is, but I can't unpack what the underlying priority is that a parent is trying to get at with it. And that's where Thoughtexchange allows. When we started, and within Elk Island Catholic, we've now moved on to a 4-year cycle. And the reason for that is that's in alignment with our board. Our trustees now come in for a 4-year cycle. So we have it aligned with that. And so we start with a global exchange through to all of our stakeholders. And when we're developing what used to be 3-year ed plan, now our 4-year ed plan. Our ed plan is, and now we've reported Alberta Education now for 6 years, it's a 1-pager. And we boiled it down to, we have 4 key priorities within Elk Island Catholic. And specifically, they're faith formation, quality teaching and learning, wellness and engagement. But more importantly, it is, why are those our priorities? With assurance, it's shifting from developing, and there may be a tendency to develop a school plan or division plan in isolation. So the superintendent team is getting together saying, hey, we think this is the direction. Or principals and assistant principals getting together because it's that time of year to work on their school plan, and the two of them bang out the school plan on a weekend to move it forward. It's making that shift from why is that a priority? So when we, in that 4-year cycle, we go out to our larger community with a couple basic questions. What are we doing well? What do we need to improve upon? And is there something we should specifically be changing? When we asked this question and we had thousands of parents participate, we were then able to prioritize through the thought exchange and boiled it down to, as I mentioned, those 4 overarching goals. So when I'm asked by the ministry or asked by our board or even by a parent, why is that a goal? Well, it's because that's what we heard when we engaged our stakeholders, our students, our staff, our parents, and larger community. This is what they prioritize. So on that 4-year cycle where we develop it once, we also on a yearly cycle do a thought exchange, and we have our schools looking at it to make the modifications and that type of thing.
So Shawn, I want to jump in because I think that you've set this up so beautifully of explaining what this kind of foundational shift is. And I might take us to the next slide here because I want to dig into a little bit of how we can conceptualize this at the division level and thinking about this shift. And I know leaders are at different points within this depending on the division. But can you walk us through how we can think about this shift as having multiple entry points and talk us through a little bit about what that has meant for your work at Elk Island?
And we weren't able to even come up with wrapping our head around the assurance until about year 4 of our process. We're able then to sit back and say, how do we chunk this? Because it isn't just layering an added thing into the accountability. It really is a big shift. And each of these areas could be a day-long insert in service with it. But when we break it around, there are what we deem to be 6 key areas for a division to be considering. And each one is a different entry point into assurance, and each one can be a different time of the year. When we first started in Elk Island Catholic, it was our secretary treasurer that was driving a lot of it to start with, and it was around priority-based budgeting. From there, it was then use of the data. So I wouldn't advocate for a board that's thinking about starting and putting their toe into the assurance that you need to be working in all 6 of these areas. Maybe take one. Is it the engagement piece? Are you at the point where you're starting to develop and you need to hear from your stakeholders what the priorities are? That would be on the right-hand side, that engagement thought exchange piece. For us, we're seeing it as a cyclical piece, also with a repeat of it. But I'm going to start in the top left. As I talked about, we have a publicly facing dashboard for the division and every one of our schools. If interested, if you go to dashboard.eics.ab.ca, you'll be able to see that with it. But every one of our priorities that we've done has a measure to it, and it is reported. And if you are a data-rich organization, you might feel that's a good starting point into assurance. I'm gonna go backwards. All of us are asked in January, February to complete the accountability pillar survey from the province. Again, narrow, only certain students, only certain questions. Without Elk Island Catholic, what we did was we combined, we now call it our accountability assurance survey, because we've taken every question that we've come up with and we've taken all of the accountability pillar questions and we're surveying them to all of our parents, students, and staff in January and February. So when it comes time for, and that's January, February, March 1, we have then populated for our administrators in our community, our dashboards of the division and all of the schools. So we're starting to work with our data March 1, whereas in the old accountability pillar, we weren't getting some of our data until May, and then another report in about October. It's too late to inform and to know what those strategies are. Also with it, the area priority budgeting, do we as an organization, are we putting our dollars where we're saying our priorities are? Are we then able to report back, whether to our stakeholders or to Alberta Education, here are the specific dollars that we spent in this priority tied to our strategy? Or if asked, why are we spending our money that way? Well, because when we engaged our stakeholders, this is what they said through the engagement piece, through the thought exchange. This is where we've set it into a priority within our plan, and then this is how we are expending our dollars with it. After 6 years, 7 years, we're now granular enough that when a teacher requests a sub to go on professional development day, they need to click off which priority tied to the school plan or division plan that PD is hitting. The beautiful thing then is we're now able to report on every area the exact dollars of PD and expenditures that have gone through to that priority area. But that's getting along within the process.
Shawn, one piece that's coming up for me when you're talking and thinking about how leaders can access these at different points depending on where they are, and thinking about how different people within the divisions can actually be supporting this and how that plays in with this idea of coherence. I'm wondering if you can talk to us a little bit about how the shift from accountability to assurance is impacting a leadership shift. And I think you had used the language earlier, or maybe I'm borrowing this from another partner, of open and learning leadership. I'm wondering if you can just touch on that quickly for us before we move into the timeline piece.
Well, I'm going to shift it just a little bit, but I'm going to talk about my personal belief. If a principal or a senior admin's mindset is one of command and control, assurance is going to be difficult. If it's in regards to empower and engage, it's going to be smoother, because it's not about when the data comes. When we get our reports and the schools get their reports and the dashboards open on March 1 and we start working with data, the first thing is, what can you celebrate in your data? Coming at it from that strength-based approach. It's not about leaning on an administrator on accountability, but how come this measure? And that's a culture that needs to be created around improvement. And it's working with the admin teams when they're sharing their data with their schools. And so as a senior leader, my questions when we meet, so after the schools have developed, well, the division develops its assurance plan for the year through Thoughtexchange, then each school works on their school assurance plan. So as senior admin, we meet with each admin team, and then we say, why is that your priority? You're saying this, well, and what we expect to hear is, how have you engaged the stakeholders? What have you heard? How are you providing that layer of assurance for? But again, not about accountability and control, but about assuring and in the right direction. And if you're not hitting the mark, then and how are we hearing that? Through data, through engagement, then we change the strategy.
I love that. Yeah, so it's that bottom-up priority-based approach that that you were speaking about previously. And I think that this shifts us nicely into looking at what the timeline looks like. And this has the slide that we're going to be showing in just a moment. It's a combination of both the work that you have done as well as some pieces and areas of opportunity that we've seen from work with other partners. So what Thoughtexchange has done is kind of mapped out an idea of what assurance could look like at a division in terms of timelines and where there could be some supports there. And having this wealth of knowledge, Shawn, from working with it for over 5 years, could you just briefly walk us through what a timeline looks like for you at Elk Island with assurance?
And again, I'm going to start with the end in mind, because what it used to be with accountability pillar was we were getting our last bit of results and the accountability report in November. Well, we've already staffed our buildings. Every timetable is built. All the budgets have been allocated. If there's something that we're getting within our accountability report in November, we're already in a year's lag if we're going to be using that to inform our priorities to make the change. And that's where that priority-based budgeting piece came in big for us as an organization. Because the reason we combined our assurance and our accountability survey in January, February is so we could have the data in our dashboard by March 1. Then March became the engagement month, where the admin were going out to their school councils, their staff, and their students through Thoughtexchange and through other means to say, have we got our priorities right based on our data? Then from March to April, it is, all right, if these are our priorities, the principal's then looking into their budgets, saying, what do I need to do? How much time do I need to allocate towards collaboration? Or maybe, when our divisions are collaborative response mode. How many dollars are we going to allocate into our priority of FNMI? Or are we hearing from our public that our sole priority is small class sizes? Are we going to be addressing that piece? But it's the shift in timelines that assurance is allowing us, and the province allowed us with this pilot. So in the spring is when all of our work and our engagement piece and going out to the community is taking place. Then we actually don't open the administrators' budgets in the spring until they have completed their school assurance plan based upon the data that's in alignment. So we have a meeting with all of our admin team individually, senior admin, and our language is we're seeking assurance that you're heading in the right direction. And so after we've had that meeting, then their budgets are open. Then in April, May, June, they're staffing the buildings based upon the priority. So when we open the school September 1, we're done that piece. Now, also, and we talk about coherence, Kai, in regards to the province, the division, the school, and the individual teacher. We've also, the teacher through the teacher quality standards has alignment with their PGP. But we work through with the ATA, every staff member in our division completes a staff assurance development plan. That is in alignment to our assurance plan. So we say to all of our staff, how are you going to have a goal in regards to your quality teaching and learning, your faith, wellness, and engagement? So that way we have alignment from the staff through to the school and so on. Now, behind the scenes, we have this all done electronically. And when the staff completes their staff assurance development plan, the principals can pull up a report seeing what the priorities are they've heard from their staff around the goals they want to work on. And so then when the admin team is developing their PD plan for the year, they're able to have engaged their staff in regards to that knowledge or priority, so they can develop their PD plan. When it comes to September, it's about the classroom. It's about focusing on the teaching and learning. And then September, October, November, we're working through, and we're always that cyclical nature of our dashboard. When leveled reading is occurring, those results show up on the dashboard and so on. So we're adding to that.
Yeah, and it's really coming through this cyclical nature and this piece of continuity, both in terms of the continuity between plans as well as the ongoing nature of the work that you're doing. So I want to shift into understanding a little bit of the questions and the feedbacks and the thoughts that all the leaders, we've got a great number of leaders here, and I'm sure they've got a number of questions for you. So before we jump into this, I want to let everyone who's here today with us know that based on this conversation, based on the many conversations we've had with Shawn, with a number of different leaders doing these pilots, we've put together some resources based on the timeline and the framework that we've outlined of how Thoughtexchange can support at these different entry points and along the timeline to support both the big priority gathering as well as these ongoing small pieces, developing the school assurance plan, having these ongoing check-ins. And some of the main pillars that we see as this piece of alignment is supporting, as you so eloquently said, Shawn, the bottom-up priority-based budget to be able to inform how are the dollars spent, why are they spent there, and look to it in this deep understanding of what the community's needs are, and then building ownership through that process so that when the decisions are made, they're backed by data in a way that has an inclusive nature to the very process. So one of the pieces that I love that you've modeled so well is really that not just transparent process of the reporting and of the live dashboard, but the inclusive nature of it. And I think there's been this beautiful alignment between the work that you're doing and the way that you're leveraging Thoughtexchange in that. So I want to give a moment for us to, oh, perfect. Amelia's posted the dashboard link for everyone. I want to give a moment to us to now turn so that we can actually hear from the participants what some thoughts and feedback are on this. So Shawn Hemming, I'll turn this over to you so that we can lead this conversation.
That's great. Thanks, Kai. So what I'm going to do here is just stop sharing my screen for a second. And in a second, I'm going to reshare the link to our Thoughtexchange. So we're going to give everyone a chance who's listening in today to participate and to ask and share some thoughts and questions for Shawn. So just bear with me here. I'll pull that up.
While Shawn's pulling that up, I'll set the intention as well that the resource that we've created for partners or for people who are just interested in learning more, that will be available in the next day or two, and we can send that out to everyone who joined today. So there's you're welcome to take notes, and we'll be providing those resources for you.
Perfect. Thanks, Kai. And so on your screen, you should be able to see the QR code. So what you can do is if you have an iPhone, you can pull out the camera app, hover over the QR code, and it should open up a link you can open in your web browser. Android phone, you may have to use Google Lens or a QR code reader. Alternatively, you can click the link that's in the chat or to go to tejoin.com. And when you get into the exchange, there's going to be 3 parts. First, we're going to ask you to share your thoughts or questions for Shawn. And then after you've shared your thoughts or questions, move into the star step and you'll have a chance to rate the thoughts that other people have shared. 5 stars being full agreement, 1 star being lower agreement or less interested in hearing Shawn's response maybe to that question. And so I'll give us about 4 minutes to do that, and then we'll look at the results. All right, so I'll draw everyone's attention back to our main screen here if you navigated away. And just give everyone a better idea of what you're seeing on the left-hand side here. This is a visual representation of everyone who's involved in the conversation this morning from various locations, wherever you are. So the purple people, it's everyone as they're joining the conversation, the thoughts that are being shared, and then the orange lines are the connections being drawn between everyone and their thoughts. And so that's the ratings that we're talking about. And just going to bring us over to our next screen here. All right, perfect. All right, so we'll start at the top here. I love the switch in timelines so we can begin in September by working on our established goals. Great thought there. Shawn, I don't know if you have any comment on that thought or the first couple thoughts here.
For us, this was one of the biggest advantages that Alberta Education allowed us the autonomy to be able to do this on our own. We're still pushing the ministry where it comes to the accounting, because they're still wanting to do the accountability pillar survey, and they may call it the assurance survey. But we're still asking for the ability, because we want to survey all of our students, staff, we start with our students in grade 4, so grade 4 and up. But all grade students, grade 4 and up, staff, parents, stakeholders, that we combine all of our questions as well as the accountability pillar. When on our one pager that is there, we also have a blueprint. So every measure that is there tied to our priority and strategy has a tie right to our dashboard. So we can go from a number on the dashboard through to the question that asked through the survey, wherever that data is collected. And it's so no longer we have somebody say, well, where did that measure come from? Well, because of the blueprint, it's seamlessly tied through. But that alignment piece of priority-based budgeting, it doesn't work to have the year lag when we're finding out in November or finding out in late June on what we need to improve upon, because we've already staffed our buildings. So that's a huge upside for us.
For sure, that's great. And so that kind of keyed in on the second one about evidence playing a role in your identifying your priorities. Any comments on the 4-year plan and the way it aligns with the board elections, Shawn?
I'm going to go back to the other one that you, Shawn, just quickly in regards to working with data.
Sure.
To be data rich, you really must lead by modeling that it's not about the number. And if a division has been won or a school's been won, well, if we got a 96% last year, we have to get a 97. We have to improve by 1%. It's shifting that focus from the result to the process. What is the strategy? What are we doing? If we're low on a measure, it's okay. But let's choose another strategy to get there. It's also modeling, because the moment we open up the dashboards, we have a got data now what session that we lead all of our admin through. And so that's about first week of March. We say to them purposely, we don't want to talk about anything, because they want to go to that low measure and what are they going to do? Which measures are you going to celebrate with your school councils, your students, your staff, in your community? What have you done well? And after you focused on that, then getting down to the piece of what areas that we can improve upon. But that's a cultural piece, and it takes time to build people up. And then once they're built up, to be able to change some of the directions and goals that they might be working. Sorry, Shawn, I got talking and forgetting what the actual question was.
That's okay. That's perfect, Shawn. That's great. Kai, I don't know if you have any other thoughts to add, but otherwise I'll jump into the next thought there. So we'll look at the next one. Love the 4-year plan that aligns with the board elections.
It also honors the work of our governors. So when they start their term, we're going through this process. So we're able to say to them, here's the priorities as we've heard. We've done an engagement. We've had how many thousands of parents, student, staff participate. X number of thoughts come forward, the priority or the ratings that have been done. And it empowers them when they're approving that 4-year plan. That's in alignment with what they want as governors as well.
Perfect. Thanks, Shawn. So we've been talking a lot about the timelines of the assurance framework, better reflect and match the implementation process around school environment, allowing for better alignment with implementation. So great thought there, which I think you've just been speaking to mostly. Any other thoughts there, Shawn?
No, but I'm going to jump on to the next one, coherence between data and action.
Perfect.
We were hearing from some of our administrators that cleanliness of the schools is an issue. So we built those questions into our assurance survey. So we then surveyed the staff, students, and parents and so on to be able to get the data. We then have our facilities department completes then an assurance plan. And so that assurance plan based upon that data, and so our cleanliness of the schools is also posted on our publicly facing dashboard for them, not just the employee, but the staff itself to be tracking. Another alignment piece is as a superintendent, I provide to the senior admin and as well as the directors each year a superintendent mandate letter. And in there is there to report back by way of a work plan that the goals that are to be achieved department-wise. So that is also in alignment with. So it's again leading back to that coherence piece, the data and the action that comes from.
That's great. And I love the connection between the data and action here. And I think it leads well into a thought that's a couple down here. So wondering if the data, which is clearly more robust, is useful enough to warrant the extra responsibility this places on the division. Can you talk a little bit about maybe how you've rolled out Thoughtexchange and what that extra responsibility really looks like, or how that's going?
Yeah, it evolved over time. It also evolved that one of our assistant superintendents as part of their portfolio, the assurance piece. A division can't start this all in 1 year, but as you're making those shifts in 3, 4, 5 years time, our dashboard, for example, and we've committed to the province that we're willing to share anything and all that we have. Our dashboard is built through a Google platform, there's zero cost. And within 2 days, a division can have that dashboard up and going. But it's not just about the number, it's unpacking what are the questions, what data do we want to be asking, why are we asking that data? So when we were developing, pulled together a number of sources. So we used to do a Gallup Q12 around engagement, the Tell Them For Me surveys. We had our Catholicity questions that we would be going on. But all of those are congregated now into the one. Again, it's through, I heard this from Kai, the idea of moving from loud to crowd. That's one of the real strengths that we found, and that's why we're encouraging Thoughtexchange, is it's not that one angry voice or the one person that, and the smaller your survey sample, that on the accountability pillar, if you're a school that's getting 15 respondents from a parents, a few loud voices can really lower a result. So we're surveying everybody. But through Thoughtexchange, we're going out to the community and saying, are we getting it right? And I think somebody asked them the question, what are those 3 lead questions that we do for a 4-year plan? We go out to them, what are we doing well and need to celebrate? What can we improve upon? And there's some things we should be looking at changing. So those 3 questions are broad, but they're broad enough that when the ideas and the thoughts go from the community and then they're prioritized, we're able to glean from that what we're doing well. And again, celebrate first, then look at the things that we need to change to improve upon.
Perfect. That's great, Shawn. I love that the aspect of celebration and appreciation. I think that's something that you've probably seen quite a bit, and that we see a lot in exchanges, that people are celebrating or even just saying thanks for asking. My opinion about this, or involving me in these decisions. And so I think that in itself sometimes is worth some of the work that you're doing there. Comprehensive and coherent, another great thought here. Important to connect the dots and ensure the focus is on creating optimal environment for student learning. And that who is part of the leadership team driving the Thoughtexchange exchanges? So I think we talked about that a bit already, but do you want to add any more details there about how it works operationally? And
operationally, we have a data person that in-house that populates the dashboard when the data is received. We as a team, headed by our Trustee Champlain Good, who is our assistant superintendent in charge of that area in working with the exchanges. Our communication director is involved as well. But it's also at the school level. So each year, when I talk about that 4-year overarching, we're encouraging our administrators also to be doing an exchange within their schools. So when they're doing their school assurance plan, we're modeling at a division level what we're hoping to do at a school level. And it's not always Thoughtexchange. We have a model that's been really well received around priority-based budgeting. So we have a few administrators. One, his name was Joe, who put his picture on a dollar bill, called him Joe Bucks, had a school council meeting and gave every school council member $100 of Joe Bucks. He had the priorities based around the walls of the library, and then he had the parents spend their money. So they were, through budgeting, what do the parents prioritize? A number of administrators have also done this with their staffs. First key learning, there's not enough money. We know that. But then later on, when somebody comes forward and says, well, my class is too big, you've already framed the conversations, you've involved and heard from your community, and our parent council said, here's the priorities for us. But whether it's Thoughtexchange or the Joe Bucks or other ways, how has the admin team engaged students, staff, and parents to have the priorities and the goals that we've chosen for the school?
For sure. I think that's great. One of the things we talk about a lot is that process capital, right? What you're really talking about is that people are more likely to embrace, maybe bad decisions or decisions they may not be fully 100% with good process, versus, a good decision that maybe had bad process, that sort of thing. So I think you mentioned some initial questions. We talked about that a bit. We do have those questions in the resource that we've put together, some of those questions, so we can make sure that we share that with attendees out afterwards. And then I think we've just got another minute here, so I think we'll look to wrap up this morning. And if there are a few more questions here that we didn't get to, we'll make sure that we share a report of this exchange back out with everyone who's attending this morning, and we'll see if we can answer a few more questions that are farther down.
Shawn, I'll jump in.
I want
just
to
for a
thank you for your
second.
time this morning.
If I can jump in just for a second, in Alberta right now, senior admin are going, oh my goodness, the funding framework and assurance is new. And it's coming across, it's a challenge. We were afforded an opportunity through the pilot to really look at the entire process. And instead of, I mentioned that human nature piece about what are the two things we need to do to shift what we've always done so we can say we're doing assurance. There is a real opportunity through the assurance shift to make a real difference. And when we talk about coherence, that alignment, prioritizing, all of it, it's a lot of work, but it's worth it.
Shawn, I just want to thank you so much for the work that you've done on this and for your time sharing with us today. As Shawn Hemming said, we're going to follow up with more deep questions for this with some resources that we've put together, as well as our contact information. So if anyone has any questions that we didn't get to today or wants to explore anything further, feel free to reach out to us. And again, just thank you for all of your time. And Shawn, thank you so much for this conversation today.
Thank you very much.
All right. Take good care, everybody.